Hello, I am Charles Musgrove, your host of the Answers That Count podcast. Thank you for joining us for another exciting show. This is going to be another show. You want to make sure that you stick around because we've got great, what I call knowledge of nuggets that are coming your way. And this is another series with the Florida Restaurant Lodging Association where we talk about the how to manage the $15 per hour that's coming our way in the state of Florida. Well, we're going to talk to a restaurant owner of a group of independent restaurants out in Seattle, Washington, and the surrounding area. He's going to tell us about what he's done to manage that change and how he's managed the change and the cost without eroding profit. So you want to make sure to stick around. But before we get started, hit the subscribe button. That way you'll get notified when we post additional videos. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, hit the remind button. Then you'll be in tune when we post new videos. And before we get started, we got a couple of administrative things we want to cover. So first, we want to thank our sponsor, Heartland Payment Systems. Heartland, we want to thank you for sponsoring this podcast. Heartland is a longtime partner of the Florida Restaurant Lodging Association. Heartland Payment Systems is the trusted payments, payroll, and HR provider of the FRLA. Heartland provides top-end class solutions to help you grow your business. Please visit frla.org/Heartland to find out more about Heartland. Thank you, Heartland, for sponsoring this podcast series with the FRLA. Now, the FRLA, they have also asked us to read this disclaimer. This information provided is for educational purposes, and the FRLA does not warrant or endorse any particular provider. FRLA is prohibited from providing specific legal, financial, or accounting advice, and the information presented here is not intended as such. FRLA encourages businesses to consult qualified, competent advisors in these fields to explore their specific situation. All right, so we've got all that out of the way. So thank goodness we don't have any more administrative items to go through. So Chad, you know, this is something that Florida is bracing for. Right now we're dealing with just kind of the struggle, like most restaurants, to find employees. But before that hit us, and we're going to have this on the other side, we've got this $15 per hour minimum wage mandate in the state of Florida. Now, you being out in Washington, you've been dealing with this for a number of years. So tell us, so that the audience gets an idea of what the style restaurants that you have and the size of restaurants. Tell us a little bit about what your operations are out in Washington.
Great. First of all, we operate actually in two different states, Washington and Oregon. So in Washington, in Oregon, we operate our flagship restaurants, which are called the El Gaucho. It's a high-end tableside steakhouse with, Chateaubriand, Caesar salads, bananas Foster, tuxedos, the whole deal. So, it's great. So it's for people celebrating life. And then we operate within Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue, and then Portland, Oregon, as well as Walla Walla. In addition, we have our seafood restaurant called Aqua by El Gaucho on Pier 70 in Seattle, and then Heirloom, which is a farm-to-table restaurant in the Pike Place Market, very high-profile, visitor-driven area. And then in Walla Walla, we own a winery called Basil Cellars, and that is a future hospitality development that we're doing there that we just procured at the end of last year. And then we also have the Walla Walla Steak Company and Crossbuck Brewery in Walla Walla.
So all of those are full-service restaurants.
Correct. Everything is full-service table. So, in the old days, it's tipping models and very heavy on front end staff.
Right. So the price range is from, would you say, kind of medium price up to high end?
Yeah. So our kind of flagship would be in that 100 to 110 per person average per person size, and then Steakco and Crossbuck would be more in the $60 to $70 range. So a pretty good range in terms of the per head averages.
Yeah, that's a good cross section. So
and also just Walla Walla is in rural Washington, so it is a wine country destination, but it is farming land. And so it's outside of the urban environment. So what we did there was pretty interesting as well, because it isn't just downtown Seattle. We're operating in multiple environments.
Yeah, that provides some good perspective. Now, here's one of the quotes you have, and I'll call this a famous quote. It's probably one that you won't see people say here in Florida. It says, "We've not cared about minimum wage for the past 5 years." So when I read that and when you told me that, I'm like, how can that be? So just kind of as a spoiler alert for the audience, we have Chad and I've had several conversations in the past, and he's actually talked to a group of us at the FRLA about what he's done and what other restaurant owners have done, not only in Washington, but in California and Oregon, and really how they've dealt with this change, how they've managed the cost change. So, you've got the tip model, which you were under the tip model before this price mandate wage increase happened. So tell us when it started happening out to you in Washington, and tell us what the rate is now, the minimum wage.
Yeah, so I think we're 5 years on now that the minimum wage kicked in, and the city of Seattle was kind of the first, I think, after San Francisco to really jack up the wages and look at 15 as that number. What you need to know now is it's actually $16.69 is the minimum wage, no tip credit. So there's no
tip credit.
Yep. Small restaurants still have one more year, I think, of about $1.50 of a tip credit, but we'll all be together at about $17 an hour next year. So small or big. So 15 is, it's so yesterday. It's so 5 years ago that we're now going to be breaching $17 an hour.
Yes,
next year. So
it's interesting and scary that you say that. We don't get to 15 until 2026. So you've been living with this for a while. So I think the owners that are just now adopting this and are going through this, I think they have so much to learn from those that have already gone through the process. And unfortunately, we look at places like Seattle, Washington, Oregon, San Francisco, California as kind of the trendset. I hate to use the word trendsetters, but they're the guys that did it first. And we may see that wave, as unfortunate it is, go to other states in the USA. So what we're experiencing now, you've already done it. So you were at a tip model. So did you kind of walk us through that model? So you got off of the tip model early on and you went to what's called a service charge model or a service model.
Yeah. So I think, we were very traditional. We had a normal tip model. We did tip pooling across a number of different areas. So, some of the support teams, stuff that you would be very used to. And I called it, we ran a small bank, which was providing cash tips, paying people out. And over time, we converted that to tips on paychecks. So we got people used to getting paid weekly and then biweekly. But what happened is when they passed the minimum wage, we really, and at that point, it was going from like $9.78 and on that March to 15. And obviously now we're at $16.69. Projected forward and said, with all the tipped employees that we had, all the minimum wage workers, of which there were 0 minimum wage workers in anything other than tipped employees, that our dishwashers were well over $15 an hour by the time they implemented this. So one thing for people to understand is most of the world doesn't understand our entire model. So when they're attacking minimum wage, it really is the tipped employee model.
Right. Right.
So
they're going to that's going to go away. So at the time that implemented and you started to evaluate the tip model versus a service charge model, what was the tip credit at that point?
No tip credit.
Even back then, there was none.
No tip credit. So we were on the march, and so I ran the numbers and projected if we get to 15, what would our P&L look like? Mm-hmm. And we were functionally bankrupt, right? So it would take, just for my 2 Seattle restaurants, again, this is just Seattle, it would have been $700,000 in additional labor costs just on the tipped employees to meet that $15 an hour. And we have good sized restaurants, but I don't know about you, but $700,000 is a lot of money.
And that's without even dealing with the wage compression.
Yeah, that's just paying extra for the tipped employees. So we had been in a, one of the benefits of getting sued every once in a while is you hire a bunch of employment attorneys. We had a tip pooling suit that we're involved with, meals and rest periods and all that kind of stuff that we ended up settling out. But what happened is we had an opportunity to really think about what we were going to do and talk with great employment attorneys. And one of the things that came up is this idea of service charge, and then could we pay our employees at a different rate? Could we pay them through what is a commission model? And that was really the breakthrough. Is we had already had service charge within our operations because of private dining and contracted parties for about 25 to 30% of our business. So we understood that model, but it was really going, all right, the tipping model is not going to work. How could we figure out how to craft something going forward?
Yeah. You know what I really find ingenious about that, Chad, is it has, if you go to a service charge model, then you're going to pay your employees on a flat rate, just a rate per hour. So what you've been able to do with this commission model is you put back into it the incentive for the employee to work harder, to earn extra money, because it's now based on sales, but they still get to benefit from that extra work.
Yeah. And I think our real breakthrough was, we were seeing what was nationally being done out of New York with Danny Meyer, his group. We had a local group that was working on higher base wages and then, using the service charge to kind of cover those extra costs. And we had always been big believers in high variability cost models, meaning as much on a percentage basis as we could do, whether it's percentage rent. Right. With our GMs and chefs, they share a percentage of overall sales, because I like to have highly variable costs versus high fixed costs.
Absolutely.
And so when we started exploring, and we actually pulled together a small team of highly influential servers, longtime servers that we knew would tell us what they thought and also would help share the different ideas across and influence others. We started really looking at what they were making per hour. So we had because tips on checks allowed us to drill down and figure out per hour what everybody was making: servers, bussers, expos, front desk runners. We were able to take and start with that as a basis and start to begin the discussion of what could the future look like if we were to redesign this whole model. And in those conversations, there was two things that our servers asked for. And one is they asked for the ability, they wanted to be paid on what they earned and sold. So they didn't want to pool across the entire dining room floor. They wanted to earn what they delivered. And
that makes sense. I mean, that's purely an incentive model. So if they do well, they want to reap the rewards of that.
Exactly. And I'm like 100%. There are some of you that are better than others, right? Like, so, yep, you get to eat what you kill.
Right.
And second is they wanted the ability, because some of the different groups that had rolled out service charge or other models or full pricing where they increased the prices,
right,
had not allowed tipping to occur at all. And so they wanted the ability to get, what the industry calls a bump. So if you did a great job, get a little extra. And we're in a high-end business. That happens all the time, even on corporate events. So I said, I am 100% there. But what you need to understand is we're not going to use that as an opportunity to trick people, to beg for tips or do any of that kind of stuff. We're going to make it very clean and very straightforward on our receipts and on credit cards. There would be a secondary signature to add an additional gratuity. And that if that was, that it was a privilege and not a right. And if it was abused, we would take that away. So they've done a great job of actually monitoring new people and others. And those bumps average anywhere between 2 to 4% of their overall sales. So not everybody bumps, but the ones that do it's a nice kicker for their service team.
Absolutely. I think you've done so many things right there. You've involved those high achievers that are the wait staff. You've included them in the decision process. You've allowed them to earn based on the effort that they've done, and they get the additional. They're able to get additional tip if they do even extra good work.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And so when we started modeling this, we would actually take per server. We would take their sales for a couple of week period, what they earned on tips, and because of the tip outs, because we have a high tableside service and a lot of other stuff, the servers were keeping about 12.5% of sales after tip outs. So just to give some indication, It wasn't like their average tip was about 21% or 20%. The servers were keeping about 12.5 of that. The rest was tipping out to bartenders and all those things. So
they were sharing that other amount.
Yeah. So what we did is said, hey, let's start with this. Let's start with a freeze on the base wage, which at that time was, I think it was $11.50 or $11 an hour. By the time we got to roll it out. And in the Seattle law at first, you could use a portion of what's called a service charge wage to offset the difference between minimum wage and the state minimum wage, the city minimum wage, state minimum wage. So long story short, we're able to kind of just freeze minimum wage where it was at, test it for about 6 months, see where things were finalized at. We produced commission statements to show them what they were earning, old model, new model. And we have longtime pros, so all of them already knew exactly what they were making every day. We had printed out commission models for that. And so when we came back to really review it, the big breakthrough for us was that in conversation with one of our labor attorneys is that the base wage we were paying, which was this, in essence, the state minimum wage at the time, that we can use commissions to pay a different base wage less than minimum wage as long as their commissioned wages over that payroll exceeded the state minimum wage. In the case of Seattle, as long as it exceeded all of the city's minimum wage.
So you knew you were over that.
Yeah, to put it in perspective, prior to even this implementation, our servers were averaging somewhere in the $55 to $65 to $70 an hour, including tips and including their minimum wages.
You're right.
So we were well beyond that, and so we actually went to the team and said, "Hey, we want to put you on a full commission plan." And for the group that grandfathered in and tested up front, it ended up being, I think, 6.25 is because we underestimated what their sales would be overall and bumps would be, but we kept that frozen at 625, and then we paid 15% commission on gross sales less any comps. And what that did is it dropped that base wage rate quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And then for anybody new to the organization, so again, this is 5 years ago, anybody new to the organization after their training period, when they were clocked in for sales on the floor, they would get a base wage of $1 an hour plus 15% commission. Wow. And I'm not, I've got a little accounting degree and background, but the fact of the matter is on any given night now for my servers, regardless of sales, my cost of sales is about 15% for the front of the house server side. So we've turned it to a variable cost.
Yeah. So there's other benefits with that too. So not only are you able to provide the incentive, not only does the employee still make probably as much or more than what they were making under the old model, but there's also some overtime benefits that you have with this model as well.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, when we made the switch, we assumed that there would be no bumps, and so we were generous up front But the bumps have really, again, added 2 to 4%, and in some cases a higher percentage of just, we've got some dazzling servers that just do an incredible job. So they've actually had about an increase of 5 to 15% of their overall earnings where they were prior. So that's fantastic.
That's big, yeah.
And then for some of the people, because we're under the Fair Labor Standards Act, we claim a 7I exemption for those servers and bartenders. And what that is, that's a federal overtime exemption for hotel, restaurant, and retail workers, as long as they meet a couple of criteria. And one is that they at least make 1.5 times the prevailing minimum wage, whatever is the highest in whatever locality, and that half of their earnings are from commissions. And I can't remember the other one right now, and that they're in a sales environment, in that side. So what it does allow is, for the holidays, we have servers that will work extra days, go do 10 days straight in a row, because they can go ahead and clock all of that, make great money, make $60, $70, $80 an hour during that time frame. And I'm not having to worry about paying overtime for that portion, which of course we would have never allowed overtime prior to that.
Yeah, that's a big win. That's a big win for you, and it's a big win for them as well.
Yeah. I had one server who at first thought I was trying to cheat her, and I'm like, no, you don't work overtime anyway, so I'm just giving you the option if you want to. And then she came back about a few months later and she said, I thought you were trying to pull one over on us. And what I realized is I could work 10 days in a row or 12 days in a row, and then book a week in Maui in my condo, and then come back and work 10 or 12 days in a row. And so she had a whole life where she would just crank work here and then be on the beach in Maui. Yeah. And she was like, I get it now. Said, it gives your servers the ability to control that.
Yeah. So are there there has to be some negatives in this model as well.
100%. There's a couple of things that, especially coming from a tip credit, there's the FICA Tip Credit for the federal tax. So we lose about 1.5 points of, let's say the service charge is 20%. We lose about 1.5 points of that just to the loss of the FICA Tip Credit. So that is not insubstantial.
Right.
The other is we have what's called a business and occupation tax in Washington, and we have something similar now in Oregon. We lose another 0.5% of that to the government just for the privilege of doing a service charge. So those are two kind of financial hits. But if you look at us now, the difference between us, my $1 an hour in 1669 is tremendous.
Oh yeah.
And the other thing, and this is the side that I think we need to grapple with as an industry, is when we really got into not the servers, but everybody else, meaning expos and bussers and front desk and the various support positions, barbacks. It was a little shocking how much we were paying those positions, while at the same time we were complaining about being able to pay, the kitchen better, et cetera. So I at one point, I'm looking at an earnings statement, and I'm like, I have a busser making $55,000 a year, and I'm whining about paying a line cook 18 or 19.
Wow.
Like that, from an industry perspective, I think prioritization, it isn't that I don't love my bussers. It isn't any of that. It's just, we need to be realistic about where we want money to go.
True.
And I think, when we made that switch over, we converted all of our support staff to fixed hourly rates.
Plus that allowed you to control their compensation as well.
Absolutely. And their hours. Right. So all of a sudden the bussers are working for us. But we were paying kind of ridiculous rates on those. But over time, those are positions that turn over as well. And so we were, maybe I was paying $35 an hour for a busser, but only working 4 hours. And then eventually they turn into a server at another location because they've topped out of whatever they're going to get as a busser. My next busser I'll bring in at 20 or 21 4-hour shifts. So up front, we actually lost some money, but the long run was that all of those labor dollars basically were shoveled back into the P&L, which is, frankly, when I told my dad what we were doing, and he's a longtime restaurateur, he's retired now, he's 80. He's like, why didn't we do this 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's an interesting model. And I know in Florida, one of the big hesitancies, like you mentioned, is losing that FICA tip credit, because that is that can be a big number.
Yeah. And you know what, it's like anything, right? If I do it and I happen to get a tax benefit to it, fantastic. But you shouldn't drive your whole business just to get the tax benefit. And you shouldn't be holding on to this FICA tip credit as if it's so precious that you would hate to ever lose it.
Yeah.
Because if I could show you how to make more money and cover that, like,
that's the objective, right?
Why? Yeah, because by the way, FICA tip credit could go away anyways.
Absolutely. And that's what, it's funny you say that, because that's been the federal plan. When you hear about them talking in Washington, they don't have a tip credit or a FICA tip credit in their minimum wage mandate.
No. And so, I think that I was chairing the Hospitality Association, or maybe I was chairing the government affairs at the time when the Seattle passed. And then we actually had a state one pass, and there was a lot of people getting riled up about, is this, we got to fight this and let's go raise a bunch of money. And we just did polling, and we're like, it didn't matter what part of the state you were in. It didn't matter if it was red or blue. It didn't matter if it was urban or rural. Not only the vast majority, the super majority of Republicans, Democrats, urban, rural, thought minimum wage ought to go up.
What does it do?
And when you see that 60, 70% poll numbers,
yeah,
you understand that they don't get our business, nor do they care. They want us to do well, but they don't. So as an industry, and you hear this for the National Restaurant Association level, like this, I hate to tell you, it's a losing battle in the long run.
Yeah. Well,
so prepare for a different way, because it tip pulling and all the feds don't like it either. Right. So that there's a lot of things that are coming at our core model, that the forces that don't like restaurants and full service restaurants, the way we operate, are coming to battle all of those pieces and demolish your business model. Sorry to tell you that.
No,
that's what happened. Is so what we did is we just said, well, I'd rather not have be back up against the wall. I'd rather take control of our destiny. And so now we direct where our money goes. So support staff, all those, it's all on our P&L.
Right.
And I challenge you and any of the full service restaurateurs to show me a good P&L that tells me exactly where all of the labor dollars really are.
Yeah. Under a tip model, you're missing 20% of your revenue.
Yeah. I can show you our P&L, exactly how much everybody makes, exactly what my real labor cost is, my true revenue that comes through the door, which isn't just gross revenue, because it's service charge too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it changes the way you really look at your P&L and manage your business. And if you're not managing it, I would say that prior to this, we never managed tip pooling. We never really directed where that was going to go to any great degree. And if you're relying on that, we never included kitchen and tip pooling.
Right.
But if you're relying on tip pooling to cover the costs of the kitchen and somehow compensate them, it's a loser strategy in the long run, because they are coming after that as well. So
tell me also now, we're all dealing with a labor shortage right now, or that's probably not the right way to term it, but people are struggling with getting employees to work.
Yeah.
So this model that you have with the commission model also plays into having a better work environment for the employees and providing, I would say, something closer to a career rather than a 2 or 3 year filler job.
Yeah. Yeah. And so a couple of things on the server side. People don't quite understand it at first, but then you just have them talk to one of the servers and they explain it. They're like, oh, we get this. And now everybody knows about our model in the professional server level, because it's been such a great model for them to do. We've been able to basically continue to pay our kitchen at, top or at, close to the top of the market, because we've been able to relieve some of that minimum wage pressure and redirect those funds. So we brought everybody back from the pandemic layoffs, and we've been a heck of a lot more locked down than Florida, but we brought everybody back at the same rates that was pre-pandemic, where we were already on an accelerated, we're breaching $20 an hour for line cooks. I mean, just really accelerated labor. And then on the support teams, we're actually able to compete against retailers and others that, instead of the typical restaurant, full service restaurant, advertising for a front desk or busser, they have this really compelling job statement. And then they say, and you make what's your compensation? Minimum wage plus tips.
Right. They don't know what that is, right?
What is that?
Yeah.
So we just say, start with us. You make $22 an hour. I'm competing. I can compete with Nordstrom's. I can compete with any of the retailers, and being declarative, all of a sudden it's real for people.
Right.
And it was a front desk person that interviewed early on, and I was just asking how things were going, and and she said, "Oh, it's great." And I'm like, how's the compensation? And I think at that point she was making $16 an hour. And she was getting an additional $4 or $5 an hour in tips. And she goes, but I don't count that because I can't, it's not guaranteed. So I'm like,
she wasn't giving you credit for that, or earning
for making 20 or 21.
Right.
So this is pre us doing that. So I just, to me, it was like a light bulb going off. I'm like, why are we not, we should tell people what they actually make.
Right.
And just pay them. And not having them rely on the servers tipping them out. And we've seen all this, right? Who do the bussers work for? Who does front desk work for? They work for whoever's going to pay them.
Exactly.
Right? And so in the old model, the bussers always worked for the servers.
Right.
In our model, they work for me.
Yeah. Servers
reset their last tables. They don't just pay off $5 to allow the busser to go do that. So it just changes a little bit of the dynamics that makes it more of a pro shop. And then finally on this, because I think this is an important element, especially in this world of, discrimination, harassment, sexual stuff, all of that, is our servers make what they make, selling what they sell. And my longtime server, 18-year veteran, said, Chad, I didn't realize how much I prejudged tables until I didn't have to.
Interesting.
I practice my craft. I get paid. If I do it really well, I might get a little extra on top. So they don't have to worry that it's a 6 top, and they don't have to worry about any preconceived notions. They deliver, they get paid.
Yeah.
And so that's pro. To me, that's a professional deal.
Big pro. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the model. It's so compelling. And I think we're going to see more of that, as the minimum wage ticks up, it's going to force harder decisions. So one of the other things that you pointed out is you need to be proactive. You need to start planning now. You need to look at the strategies, whether that is all in on a commission model, or we're going to do it when this happens. It's kind of let's consider all things and go with a plan that we believe is going to work. But doing nothing is not a plan.
I don't think so. I mean, we shared the general approach we were going to take with probably 30 or 40 restaurateurs in Portland market. And at the end of the day, they'll just said, well, we're going to wait and see what happens. Right. I will tell you right now, our Portland numbers pre-pandemic, our operating income was back at 01 levels.
So you'd gained all that back. Right.
I mean, and for, again, we're Oregon, Washington, super high minimum wage states, right? So I've already at a disadvantage against Florida and Arizona and others. I think the average operating income level in Washington is like 3%, right? Pretty good restaurants are getting 6 to 8. Mm-hmm. I was almost at 15% EBITDA.
Wow.
pre-pandemic. And that is with all of the wage inflation. That's with, minimum wage and scheduling laws and all that kind of stuff. So nobody else did it.
That shows it works.
Well, and nobody else did it because our industry is unfortunately nervous about change.
Right.
And, at some point the change is coming. It's just whether you're going to do it or whether it's done to you. And what I promised my staff is we were going to do that with them and for them and not to them. And the earlier you start down this process of figuring out what that new model is, getting your team involved to help craft it and defend it when it does roll out, I think important. There's going to be a percentage of guests. Forget the commission model, just the service charge or surcharge. But for us, it was service charge. Because surcharge didn't feel like it was really a long-term solution. It's like, okay, so is that just going to go up every year? Like, how does that work? Service charge was, we were going to get blowback. And so I think it's the Cornell groups that looked at their studies in terms of how many people believe in tipping and that kind of stuff. And it's like 6% or 7% of the population just doesn't believe in it at all, right? So they're the people not paying your people anyways. So we already knew that they were going to complain about service charge or, my God, why are you making me tip? It's like, we're not making you tip. We're just like, you bought a bottle of wine, you're going to pay for it, and you're going to pay the service charge too. Right. And you're going to pay sales tax. And I was willing to walk away from that small group of people that never took care of our team anyways, and just let them go to your restaurant, somebody else's restaurant, because I just want really good customers who take care of our team. So there was going to be people complaining about that. And I think the most important is a group of people, a large group of people, of your loyal patrons, that were going to ask one question when this started. And what they're going to do is they're going to talk to their favorite server or bartender and ask, how's this working out?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And if the answer is, this sucks, the company's screwing me, right? It's terrible, then you're going to have a hard time keeping your promise that you're going to keep on that model. If the answer is more like, you know what, it's actually working out great, company takes great care of me, we got 401k, we got healthcare, I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
Then your loyal patrons are like, good. That's what we care about. So
those guys are selling not just the food, but they're selling the whole deal. I mean, they're the face of your business.
Well, and I got to be honest, Charles, I'm not sure what the this war on your servers, this war on your primary sales team that some celebrity chef owners and some of the others seem to be doing, or talking about the equality between front of the house and back. These are different positions.
Right, they are.
I love my sales teams. And by the way, without your servers and your bartenders, what do you got?
That's right.
Right. And so why not embrace what it is? And that if you have exceptional salespeople, why not let them make exceptional money?
Exactly. And
then pay your team, your culinary team, excellently as well, right? And we pay our sous chefs, and chefs are all on commission plans as well, just so you know. So the busier it is, the more they make. So there's lots of ways to deal with those things. But
awesome. I want you to touch on we've talked about this, and we talked about this off air, but pre-pandemic, tell us how you're doing now that things are. I know you're not as opened up as Florida, but how is business returning in Washington and the other states that you're in, and how are you adapting to that?
So when we reopened, when we thought about reopening and kind of in the June timeframe, we came back and we said, we're going to really rethink what we're doing. And at that time, because we were in urban environments and other things, we had lunch at a couple of places. We told landlords we would not be opening for lunch. We also made the decision to really keep what I'd call the A team, so the first level team, and we cut our days of operation to 5 days. and told the landlords we're gonna operate Tuesday through Saturday. I could call up a nice, solid management team and all of our senior servers and just deliver at whatever capacity level they're going to do. And so with that, we actually dropped about half of our head count, and it has made life tremendously easier. We continue to have capacity restrictions, and I hate to tell you, like last week, Oregon shut us down. We weren't even allowed to have indoor dining in Portland. Wow. And prior to that, and even today, now they let us reopen after 1 week. A little bit of political pressure, I think. This isn't data driven anymore. They let us open after 1 week, but we have a 25% capacity cap, and we can actually only have 50 individuals inside our 7,500 square foot restaurant, including employees.
Wow.
Okay.
I mean, how in the world can you stay in business like that?
Well, I could still do $11,000 on a night. It's kind of crazy, but it happens. But I was doing $25,000 prior to that. So, the reality is when we're allowed to open, demand is there. Demand is everywhere. And even in our downtown urban markets like Seattle, we're seeing tremendous uptick in counts and demand on the weekends. And now pipeline of contracted parties, of businesses, individuals doing larger scale events is just, we're going to have an epic summer.
Wow.
we still need to
open up.
We have no reopening plan in Washington State.
Man.
And the governor of Oregon just announced their reopening plan. So I like salivate over Florida and Arizona and Texas and even New York. I mean, their capacity constraints are going to be gone next week.
Yeah.
Well,
Chad, you're coming to Florida to speak to the board meeting with the Florida Restaurant Lodging Association. Maybe you want to do a scouting venture while you're here too. So,
it's always a little R&D, right?
Exactly. So we'd love to have you here in Florida. Thank you so much. This has been so informative, and I think the model that you've adopted is really something that I think not only the restaurant owners in Florida but throughout the U.S. should look at this, because I really think it's worthy of it, and I think it has so much merit in fortifying your business for the future. Because just like you said, we know the tip credit model is going to be under attack, and this really provides a better way, a better foundation of a company to provide careers, provide a good opportunity for the employees. So thank you for leading the way on that.
I appreciate it, and I got to thank my team, because they're the ones that have actually delivered on this. I mean, we came up with the ideas, but they've embraced it, and at the end of the day, your crew and teams have to be behind you. And luckily they are, and we're behind them. So
good information. Thank you so much, Chad. I look forward to talking to you in person and seeing you at the board meeting at FRLA in June. So
my pleasure.
Until then, peace,